from northern Cameroon. And you notice how big these horses are. There's a book that you probably would find very interesting called The Horse in West African History by Robin Law, Oxford University Press, published 1980, reprinted, originally published 1980, I believe. But we also cover it in our own piece, the 100,000 Horsemen of West Africa. Okay, so you had ranges. Horses were traded and bred and interbred, if that's the correct term, in West Africa. You had Arabian horses, you had Berber horses, and you had Sudanese, so what they called Dongala horses, all of which were bred with traditional African horses. You had a whole variety of horses and types of breeds of horses in West Africa. Next, please. Check this out. Now, this is from the same account that I was just reading from, Dixon Denham, I always say that, account published in 1826, and here, this is what is called Lafidi. Lafidi is a very interesting substance. It's like life preservers are made out of this substance. I think it's called kapok. Okay, these are made out of kapok also. It's tightly stuffed. It's kind of wearing a life preserver. It's not real heavy, but it's heavy enough when you got this much on you, right? That they had to be just like the knights in medieval Europe. They had to be horsed. They had to be helped up on the horse, and somebody had to go, follow them in the battle. And if they got down, they had to be helped back up. And they were shock troops, and they were fairly protected. There are German records from the 1870s that point out that the use of the Lafidi, one German Nachigal witnessed a battle in which there was something like 7,000 cavalry and 1,600 and some odd numbers wore Lafidi during that particular battle. So it's fairly widely used. And the record's full of different illustrations of different kinds of Lafidi. Next, please. We're going to move faster because what time are we supposed to be finished?
When you finish, get finished.
Oh. This is the tradition living today. Lafidi was often very colorful stuff and used in ceremony as well as in battle. This is from Nigeria, 1974. I use this as the poster in the 100,000 Horsemen of West Africa. Next, please. Okay. Now we're really getting into the subject a little more. This was all preparatory. Okay? The points being, 1, West Africa is dominated by people. 2, there are lots of different types of people. 3, that the horse on the flatlands is widely used. Now, all those factors impact the nature of cities. You see what I'm saying? So what I'm going to be doing now is talking about the walled cities of West Africa. Now, I put this shot in, and technically it's not in West Africa, but it's the only shot that I could find that the wall was small enough that they could put it in one illustration. I'll get into that in detail. This is from southern Libya in 1823. And you see how the structure, this large wall, is built around this small town, or this encampment. You see that? West Africa had 200 walled cities. Now, hey, if I had said, talk about horses, people would, sure, right, anything you say, right? West Africa, I'm telling you, this is an easy to document fact. And if we don't look in the direction of it, we'll never find it. West Africa had 200 walled cities. So we're going to talk just about a few of them now. Next, please. Could I get a cup of tea? Oh, thank you. Okay. There are many types of walled cities in West Africa. This is a walled city of a southern savannah town called Sikasso. we'll move forward because I want to go into some in more detail than others. Okay, this is the wall of Sokoto. Sokoto was the capital of a jihad state, a radical Muslim state that was founded in 1804 in Nigeria. And between 1804 and 1811, the state grew to encompass 350,000 square miles. It was a quickly growing state, and it began to take over, to dominate what was called, before that, the House of City-States. Okay, here you have, from 1856, from Barth, you have an illustration of the market of Sokoto, which is flipped. However, this is the wall. Can you see it, of Sokoto? Right? Can you all see that? Now, let me show you how the Europeans do us, how they do it. The next year, the French, actually this is 1859 in the American edition, because the next year, in 1860, the French did a reproduction of that, their own graphic artists, and the wall was missing. The wall was missing. Next, please. The wall of Sokoto was roughly a square that was about 1.5 miles on each side. Now, one of the most highly documented walled cities in West Africa, we have a whole section on that in the urban heritage of West Africa, is the city of Kano, K-A-N-O. Kano is one of the largest cities in northern Nigeria today, and it's been a center of trade and commerce for at least 900 years. Kano, this is not a very good outline of the wall. It's just one of the first ones. I have other ones that are better and more accurate. But it's something that a lot of people drew and a lot of people photographed and stuff. It's very impressive. The wall was 40 feet thick at the base. It was 35 to 50 feet high. And it went 14 miles around the city. Miles around the city. In it, you had a large city. We're going to show a few shots of Kano now.
Excuse me.
Yes.
Could you repeat those numbers? How many feet high was it?
It varied. Thank you very much. It varied from 35 to 50 feet in height. It was 40 feet thick at the base, and it encompassed the city of Kano for 14 miles. You see these little breaks here? These are gates to the city. The next shot is of one of those gates. Remember how we did the overview of Grindam, and then this is a gate from the wall of Kano. 1904. Now these guys are on horseback. See, this is the wall. Now you can ask me, how did they get through that wall during the colonial invasion? We'll talk about it, if you like. It's a really deep thing that happened in Kano, too. But anyway, next, please. Here's another gate. You can see through here. See, this is the opening on the other side? How thick the wall is. It's an earthen wall. Inside, check this out. Why would you need the wall this big? Because you had 10,000 cavalry in the army of your nearest rival. Otherwise, you wouldn't need a wall this big. And also, they were used to control trade coming in and out of the city. There were many uses. They were used to organize people. In times of famine, there were large areas of croplands inside of the walls of Kano. Next, please. Well, remember, this is Kano today. You see what I'm saying? See this? If you just looked at this real casual, you say, oh, that's just like a hut. Look, this is a human being right here. See that? See this little thing? That's a human being. This is a basket on top of her head, and this is her feet, and this is her shadow. You see, and the wall is 25 feet higher than she is, of the building. You have to look at these things carefully. Okay, Kano has an international airport, stuff like that. Next, please. This is an illustration of one of the streets in Kano. Kano has some wonderfully decorated buildings and architecture. From 1911. Next, please. Okay, this you can't see very well, but this is the wall. This is a photograph of the wall of Kano from somewhat of a distance. 14 miles around the city. Wonderful. And check this out. Within a radius of 30 miles, within, a circle with a 30-mile radius, drawn with Kano in the middle, there were 40 more walled cities and towns. There are over 200 in that region of northern Nigeria. You understand where I'm coming from now? I'm not jiving you. You see, there's a problem when we start to believe that after the slave trade ruined Africa. These photographs were taken after the slave trade was over. Next, please. Okay, I don't know how well you can see this, but this gives you just a very small idea of the number of major cities. Now, the point I want to try to make now is a really vital point. Just like, okay, keep going, a little more. I don't think it's going to do it, because the wall is curved, like, curved here and curved here. Okay. Anyway, my point being, when you see Kano on a map, you will find Kano on a map, I guarantee you. You'll find Kano on a map. But Kano is not just Kano. Kano is the hub of a number of cities and towns. Just like, I'm from D.C. If somebody lives in Silver Spring and they go to another country, they say, I live in Washington. Right? I'm sure you don't know any people like this, but I do, who are from Newark, but they'll say they're from New York. Okay? Every city is the hub of many towns and cities, smaller cities. Okay, the same is true in Africa. When you see Kano on the map, you don't just see Kano. There are really many cities there. And so here, when you have a map of the central Sudan, and you see all these major cities, you're really seeing hundreds of cities. Clusters of cities. Why? Because here's an area with 200 million people. See what I'm saying? This area here has 100 million people today. Today. Now, how can you have 100 million people they don't have that much Pepsi Cola to make the people jump up and down. You got the right one this time. Okay, next please. I get excited, I like this stuff. It really turns me on, makes me feel like, I know now that they really are lying to me. It's about the place I came from, my people came from. Draw a picture of the triangular trade. Is it going to go to East Africa? It's going to go to South Africa? Some might go to Angola. But most of that trade went straight across, the shortcut to South America. It's no accident that there are more black people in Brazil than there are in the United States. So when you start talking about where the people from West Africa, above the equator, which is like, where West Africa is, it was also above the equator to the islands and to the Americas. This is us. These are what our cousins have been doing, and we haven't seen it because they told us our cousins just went and, started standing on their one foot, I don't know. This is the town, the city I should say, the walled city of Katsina, which is another one of there were so many walled cities and towns. The walls started being built around the 1300s. And there were so many walled cities and towns in this area where Hausa is a major language that the historians call the history of this region, they call it the Hausa city-states. You heard of the Hausa city-states. They were called Hausa city-states because almost all of them featured large walled cities. that was a hub of particular states and had other cities around them. If you see Katsina here, there's a scale on this map done in the 1850s. This scale has 3 geographical miles on the scale. This is 1 mile. I gotta figure out how to get rid of this hum. Okay, this has 1 mile on it. Okay, as you see, now this wall here is 3 or 4 miles right there. So we're talking about a 12-mile walk for Katsina. Next, please. This is, anyway, could you flip that? Okay, let me flip it then. Excuse me. In Nigeria, Yoruba city in Nigeria. No, I said I was going to flip it, so let me flip it because I said I was going to do it, right? Okay. Akuta had a circular wall. And as you see, Akuta is deep too. When you start to talk about Yoruba walling traditions, the walls in Yoruba, Benin, for example, was a Yoruba area place. It was a Yoruba speaking generally. They had their own dialect of it, but it was basically a Yoruba dialect. Okay, now, when you had the Yoruba walls, Yorubas had all kinds of walls. The Yoruba walls, and I have a diagram of this in the Urban Heritage, the Yoruba walls formed concentric circles. Sometimes you would have like 8, 9, or 10 walls. And they would get bigger and higher as you got closer toward the center. And they also had walls around the states. Here you have the Yoruba city of Abeokuta. And the interesting part about this is that Abeokuta was a town that was not even founded until the 1830s. After the fall of Old Oyo, Abeokuta was established as one of the retreat capitals. A wall was built around it, and this is from the 1850s, 20 years later, and it's got a wall, going around it that encompasses high mountains and a river. Next, please. This is a close-up of the wall of Sikasso. We showed it a little earlier. You see how strong that wall is? This is a small town, a small city, I should say, in Mali, called Sikasso, S-I-K-A-S-S-O. Okay, next, please. When you start talking about walls, walls were an important part of the urban lifestyle. You had inner walls, outer walls, compound walls. This is from Lingloff's 1891 book on the Benin massacre, and it's of Benin City. Now, Benin is known for its bronze works, its artworks, but to early travelers, it was just as well known for its walls and its great plazas that has very interesting architectural place. Next, please. This is one of the earliest depictions of urbanization in Africa. This particular illustration is of the city of Luango. It was done by Alfred Dapper in the year 1604. And you see in this the row houses that are being depicted and the wall around the city. Next, please. Okay, now that's going to bring us for a quick second to European knowledge of Africa. Remember, here we were in 1823. This guy was saying, we're about to go where no white man's ever gone before, and I'm real excited. Isn't that in essence what he was saying? You know, and we had this image that the Europeans came in, you know, on the coast and started taking people and penetrating the interior, and they didn't. This is a map, an early map from about the 1500s that really didn't change until the mid-1800s. And you notice how the Niger is accurately depicted? You see? The Niger goes up like this. And they have it completely wrong because they have information from Greek geographers that the Nile ran into West Africa. You know, so what do they know? Okay, next please. Could we sharpen this up just a little bit? We're about to go into another area of West Africa. Remember, it's a place with a lot of people. There's really a lot to it. All I'm doing is skimming the surface. Okay, this is just skimming the surface. And there are many, many hundreds of materials and books. I mean, we could read Miseducation of the Negro 100 times. But I mean, we could also read 100 books during that time. And I'm not against that. I like that book. But there's a lot of gaps that we have to fill in our own historical consciousness. And I am positing here that our heritage from West Africa is one of those gaps. And I'll tell you why. I knew there was something I wanted to say. When you look at the horsemen of West Africa, doesn't it make sense with that huge number of horsemen, 100,000 brothers? When I said the 100,000 horsemen, that is a completely minimal account. Completely minimal. What I did in this piece was just basically to identify 100,000, and then actually identified about 150,000 and say, well, maybe that's an exaggerated account. Let's make it 100,000. But most of the horses they used were mares. You understand? They were not, stallions. They were not mares. Most mares were not used in the armies of West Africa, in the cavalries of West Africa. Now, if there are 4 mares born for every stallion, that means instead of the 100,000 horsemen of West Africa, we could be talking about the 500,000 horsemen of West Africa. 500,000 is not that big a number when you start to look at numbers of horsemen in equestrian societies. Okay, now, the point being, that means our people, when we came over to this country, were exposed to the horse, the use of the horse, training of the horse, management of the horse, horsemanship skills. Now, is there any question as to why black horsemen were the best horsemen in the American West? The jockeys, the trainers, you say, I don't know, man, these black people really have a way with horses. I mean, see, we have a history. It's not just a way, it's a history. When you look to the urban heritage of West Africa, you see the great skill positions that were part of the lifestyle of West Africa. It is no secret, no accident that the great artisans of the South were black. We were expressing our own heritage without being able to directly link it. We were being true to ourselves when we're doing our art, when we're doing our skills with horsemanship.
What about the term blacksmiths? And then also
using it in the blacksmith's context, or just ironworking is another, and metalworking is another one of the skills that was widespread in West Africa that was brought over here. Most of the types of use of when the horses were used, they were not shoed mostly. Therefore, that particular skill in terms of iron smithing for horse purposes was not widely used. However, iron smithing and other types of metallurgy, metalworking, especially decorative metalworking and protective metalworking, they used to make chain mail and stuff like that, was used in direct carryovers. Next, please. Oh no, not next. Don't go to the next one yet. Okay. Okay, we're going to move to another area of West Africa. So far, we've talked about, the horsemen, that sort of is throughout West Africa. When we get to the walled cities, we're looking up in northern Nigeria. We're looking at the flatlands and down to the confluence of the Niger and the Benue rivers. This is the area now that we're going to talk about is the Niger Bend. One of the cities in the Niger Bend we all know was Timbuktu. Okay, Timbuktu was one of the Niger Bend cities. This illustration, in fact, we have a piece that we published on Timbuktu. I don't know if you want me to tell you what I've learned about Timbuktu or not.
Yeah.
Because it's a very interesting subject, and it doesn't make Chancellor Williams look very good in his research. Okay, but I'm going to start with the region of that. It really does, especially regarding the Battle of Tondibi and the fate of Ahmed Baba, his libraries, and the rest. That was misstated. Okay, but we'll go on first, and then we'll get into, because we are going to go into this section deals with some of the historical aspects of Timbuktu. Now, I got to back up for a second. I like Chancellor Williams. When I was younger, Chancellor Williams and I used to walk home from Howard. He lived up on 16th Street, and I was getting ready to go to Africa for the first time. And he like talked to me and helped me understand a lot of things about Africa. So I don't have, it's not a personal thing. It's just about, you know, the record and correcting things in the record that might or might not be correct. You see, in examining historical record. So it's not about Chancellor Williams as such. It's about taking, you know, because I mean, most of that book I find very interesting. It's like the part in the beginning when I was talking about the polemic that we take, you know, the ancient part of it is pretty accurate, the first people, the first civilizations, etc. But when you start saying the slave trades ruined this, you lose a lot of African history in the process. You lose the idea that it's there by accepting that polemic. And that polemic is projecting in that. And so therefore I would challenge the polemic, not the person. I like Chancellor Williams as a person, but some of the parts of Timbuktu are inaccurate. And if you like, we can discuss them in some detail.
Let's discuss them now.
You brought it up.
Yeah.
Well, I will.
You will.
I will. But, okay, we will. That's where we're at. Okay. This is the section on the Niger Bend. See, Timbuktu wasn't an isolated place. Timbuktu was an important city, just like Kano wasn't just Kano. Timbuktu wasn't just Timbuktu. Timbuktu was a part of a larger urban area that is generally called the Niger Bend. The Niger Bend is called the Niger Bend because all of the, let me back up for a second. All of the materials that we publish in our series have original maps in them. Okay? I do these maps myself. Okay, and this is the Niger River. Starts here in the mountains of Kong and Guinea, you know, it's in Guinea, and the mountains of Fruta Jalon, also in Guinea, and the, what are the mountains? I forget this mountain range. But anyway, what happens is that there's this big rainy season in West Africa, right? You all heard of rainy season? Okay, the rainy season hits these mountains, and when it hits these mountains, billions of gallons of water flow down the mountains, and they form this incredible floodplain. You know how the Nile floods every year? And it made Egypt. Egypt was the Nile. It was an oasis on the banks of the river. That's it, 500 miles long in Kemet, you know, 1,000 miles in different places in Nubia. Okay, but it was an oasis. Now, the floodplain that is formed by the western Niger, by this rainy season coming down these mountains, the top pushes the Niger River up to this point where it meets the desert. And the Niger says, uh-oh, can't beat the desert, and starts to flow back down until it forms this big delta in Nigeria. Okay? This point where the river bends is called the Niger River Bend. Right? And it is at that point where you find Timbuktu. Okay. Timbuktu was a trading city, a center of the salt trade, and to a degree the gold trade,